Content warning. This episode has mentions of extreme violence, rape, child abuse, and sexual abuse.
This is Rating Descending,
where we watch IMDb's Worst 250 so you don't have to.
My name is Abigail Ward.
And I'm Michelle St. Clair.
And tonight we are watching The Human Centipede, the first sequence. A mad scientist kidnaps and mutilates a trio of tourists in order to reassemble them into a human centipede created by stitching their mouths to each other's rectums. Let's watch.
How can you be a cynical person after Samwise Gamgee insisted to you at the midpoint that it's not? Well, not really that it's sort of later than the midpoint.
That when he insisted what?
The world can be a good place and it's worth fighting for.
Yeah.
Like how can you be cynical after that, you know?
Yeah, 100%. It was not long after the midpoint of the whole thing. Really.
Sort of like the atonement with the father sort of section, that like middle of Act 2B. Not quite apotheosis, but it's post midpoint. Yeah.
Post midpoint. That's my little fucking post-punk band.
That's actually not bad for like, you know, like a modern Midwestern emo band.
Yeah. Your mom called me last night. I didn't see her, but I saw you smile. I held your hand that time, but I didn't know that you would go.
You know how it's like it's all like so much. It's all very jangly guitar, but it's all like so much more technically complicated than like old pop punk.
It's the 17th of June and it's my birthday.
Yeah.
Tomorrow.
Which means by the time this comes out, it'll have been. What the
so much.
Come on. I need the people listening at home to understand how much Abby didn't like give any forewarning of that burp. Abby was sitting there looking like she was listening to what I said.
I sat on it.
And then it almost sort of like forced its way out of you all of a sudden.
Kept it in my back pocket.
You didn't do the respectful thing and at least point away from the microphone.
No. Or like hold a little finger up in the air like something's about to occur.
You gotta have better mic etiquette, man.
What?
I got these headphones
Look
on.
Look at your elbows on the table while we're recording, talking about mic etiquette.
Nothing to do with my microphone.
Yeah, get your hands off the table, young woman. I'm going to turn 26.
Yeah.
You're already 26.
Yeah.
26 is such a nothing age, and I'm not excited for it.
I disagree. It's very definitive. 25 is officially your mid-20s, but you're still clinging on to it. You know, you're like, that's on the younger side. Like if a character on TV is 25, they're grouped with the children. But if they're 26 on something, say like Community, they'd be grouped with the older characters.
I know what you mean. I think if we're splitting it into halves, 25, the entirety of being 25 falls on the latter half. Just mathematically, it does.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about groups, I don't really split them into halves. I split them into early, mid, late.
Yeah.
And you've got early as like, it caps off at like when you hit 24, you're now in your mid-20s. I think 24, 25, 26, mid, 27, 28, 29, late.
I think of it in terms of sitcom dynamics. 26 is where you start to approach the age of like early seasons of shows that are effectively about being 30. Like things like Friends or How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah, I was about to say,
stuff,
I'm probably the age fucking Rachel Green was when she runs in her wedding dress.
You are no longer in the early 20s sitcom. Again, there's something like Community where there's a bunch of characters who are like 19 to 21 and then around 30. But 26, you're going to be lumped in with the older people.
I'm going to get lumped in with Britta.
You're Britta.
I'm Britta. I've known that for a long time.
Yeah.
I've got big Britta energy.
You do.
I start conflict for no reason. I yell a lot and I'm very blunt. I'm very blunt.
You too sometimes start making a point without knowing entirely what it is.
The line where Britta says, "Stop infantilizing me," and then she gets on a little kid's bike and she like rides away on it. It resonated.
Yeah. I mean, we're both big defenders of those last two seasons, and that was
Britta,
a fantastic moment.
I think you would have been Abed like 4 years ago.
Thank you.
But you're definitely turning into an Annie.
Okay. I can live with that.
Yeah.
Like a later season, because I'm not
Annie.
like
You're not
Annie.
young like, oh,
yeah.
Jess,
Oh, shucks. But I'm
stop.
definitely Annie, like when she's yelling about doing the rules right. And then as soon as the rules don't make any sense, she's like, all right, let's burn down all the rules.
100%.
Make new ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got that energy. But 26 I'm going into I'm at the end of my mid-20s going into my late 20s. Let me cling to what I have. It's very upsetting, the fact that when we finish this podcast, we'll both be...
Sometimes I think about that. Like, there's so many things I'm trying to do in my life where I'm like, if I start doing this now, I'll be close to, I'll be like 28 and that's almost 30. Or I'll be 29 and but this is the thing I'm like, this will not end until I am 30. That's really terrifying.
It's terrible getting older, but I will say I like myself more as I get older. So I think me in a year will be even better than me right now, and me right now is better than I was a year ago. That's kind of. 2020 was really more of a stagnant year where we all just kind of floated, bobbed in a jar of water waiting for something to occur.
What I was going to say though is, getting older is terrifying. I agree that I certainly like myself a lot more at 26. It's weird because I'm like, oh, I'm 26, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, but I also think that 20-year-old Michelle's a fucking idiot. So, you know. But
you'll be 30 and be like, 25-year-old Michelle sucked.
The only thing that terrifies me more than aging is that almost 6 months to the day after I turn an age, you start going, oh my God, I'm going to be 26. And I'm like, come on, man. I just need this.
This week we watched The Human Centipede, the first sequence.
That's great.
There's many segues I could have used tonight.
Well, I can cut that from anywhere.
No. We watched The Human Centipede, and boy, did we. I feel like I was resting okay today, honestly. Like I've come into this episode a little flat, and I was having a perfectly mediocre fine day. Nothing bad, nothing good.
Yeah.
And in comparison, as you mentioned, to the days that we've had recently, that's a pretty good day.
Yeah.
And then I watched this movie and my mood plummeted in all sorts of ways.
Yeah, I get that.
It was confronting. It made me upset. But not because of the gore of the film. I can handle that. Yeah. Gore is fine. There was definitely moments that were disgusting. It was more everything around the film and the making of the film that made me sad.
Yeah. I mean, look, I got really annoyed at this film. And it's because it's baiting me. This movie is daring me to get already dismissive of it because it's gross. It's like, oh yeah, Human Centipede. Bet you think that's stupid. Bet you think that's disgusting. I'm making art and you're just gonna dismiss it offhand. You're not even gonna watch it. And I'm like, fuck you. This is not good enough to bait me. I hate being told what to do, and I don't like a movie that is daring me to think it's bad when it is.
Yeah, 100%. It's like they're daring you to think it's bad because they're like, but it's edgy. Like, you can't deny that it's edgy cinema. Yeah. It's shock cinema. And it's like, it doesn't mean it's good or worthwhile.
Yeah.
And I have so many thoughts about that. It really made me angry. It made me as angry as when we watched fucking 50 Shades Freed.
Yeah.
I think that I like lost my mind at that episode because we started just talking about misogyny on screen and we both just were like spitting hate that whole episode. I'm kind of in a similar place today.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm at the point of like, this movie thinks it's being artful. Like, it's not a bad movie on purpose. It thinks it's being artful. And that makes me go, I refuse to take the bait. I will approach it critically. And critically, it is fucking awful.
Yeah.
It is a bad movie.
Yeah. I think there's so many fucking things to unpack here about it, to be honest. There's like, there's a bunch of things I really want to touch on. But, like, listeners, you all know The Human Centipede. I'm sure you are drawn to this episode because everyone has seen or heard of this Human Centipede, which is rare for this list because this list is usually full of really strange, unknown titles. But this week, this is a very well-known film.
Yeah, this episode, I expect straight to the top,
and it goes straight to the top.
Oh, yeah.
You know it does.
Floor 60, baby, of the 60-floor building that I'm referring to. Sorry.
I just want to like meet you one time in a garage in a big trench coat, and I say it goes straight to the top in a gravelly voice. We say nothing else. We part ways. You have to uncover the mystery, the riddle that I have given to you.
Straight to the top.
Michelle.
My God. I go to the circus.
To the top. It only takes one bad egg to rock the barrel.
Now this just sounds like setup where it's just idiom after idiom.
It takes 2 eggs to crack a bird, but a rolling stone gathers no stones. Yeah, this film angered me. And I didn't want it to, but it did. And I think it's because this is my episode. I did the research. And the first thing I wanted to see was like who thought of this idea. And it was the director and writer Tom Six. Have you heard about Tom Six before?
I know the first 5.
Fuck off.
I've heard Model 1 wasn't very good. I assume they...
You know what? As we stated last episode, this is not a funny podcast anymore, nor is it a sexual podcast. We're here for serious debate, criticisms, critiques, analysis, no wet slapping tits, no sack fun bags of sweet fat.
No, you had your fun during my parade of focus. Now I disrupt your torrent.
Now you rain on my parade.
Yeah.
Tom Six is a Dutch filmmaker. I encourage you after this to look up a photo of him, like go onto his Wikipedia and look at the photo there.
Oh, what a fucking dork. Oh my God. This man thinks he's the coolest person on the planet in 1930. What a piece of shit.
So Tom Six is the writer-director here, and he basically got the idea for this film.
He's wearing a white suit. He looks like he owns a plantation in Cuba.
He got the idea because he was watching the news and some child molester was getting fucking sent to prison, and he and his friends were like, oh man, like that man should have his mouth stitched onto a truck driver's anus. And then that joke turned into this idea. And to his credit, before I get into it, to his credit,
I'm doubtful.
He has made a film that is very remembered and people know of it, and it was moderately successful. But it's still, you know, when you have these dark fantasies, you just don't need to make all of them. They don't need to come into fruition. We don't need to explore these things. We shouldn't.
Yeah.
Just leave it be. I don't think that the human centipede existing in the world has had a positive impact on the world.
No, it did. Like, to add to what you're saying, like, when watching this, I was very much struck by, this is not a 90-minute film. This is a 20-minute short. This isn't a premise that needs a movie. Like, this isn't a premise that has a story. It's just an excuse to do the thing. Yeah. To do the idea.
Yeah.
I mean, the most interesting scene, 100%, is when he's just explaining the human centipede.
Yeah.
Everything around that is uninteresting. Like, if it was like a weird 15-minute, like, art horror short, it might actually be okay.
But there isn't that much to explore about this other than that it's fucking awful to watch.
It's not like an interesting horror idea. It's just a weird one.
It's just a weird idea he's put into an hour and a half of film that we didn't actually have to sit the entire way through.
Yeah.
I'll give you the overview. Lindsay and Jenny, two American tourists in Germany, get a flat tire. They go to a nearby house and are drugged and detained by the doctor living there, Joseph Heiter. Lindsay attempts to save Jenny and escape, but the plan fails. Along with a Japanese tourist, Katsuro, they are all stitched into the famous mouth-to-anus situation we all know and love. Heiter is delighted by the success of the operation and treats the centipede like a dog, teaching it tricks and giving it harsh punishments. Heiter soon finds that Jenny has sepsis and will need to be killed and replaced. Two detectives visit the house to investigate the disappearance of the tourists, and Heiter sets his sights on replacing Jenny with them. Heiter isn't great at playing cool and unsus, which is an insane scene, by the way, where he really just baits the detectives into getting a warrant to search his house.
Very strange.
Katsuro stages an escape and attacks Heiter, but the centipede are soon cornered again. Katsuro aggressively monologues and slits his own throat. The detectives return and they're both killed in a shootout with Heiter, who is ultimately shot in the head. Katsuro bleeds out and Jenny dies of sepsis. Lindsay remains alive, sandwiched between them.
That's it.
That's it.
From hearing the movie, there's large swaths of it where you're like, it sounds like not much is going on. Like, the sewing together is the midpoint.
Yeah. When they awaken to find that they're the centipede halfway through the film.
Yeah.
It takes ages.
The first 45 minutes is literally nothing.
The first 45 minutes is like they get a flat tire, they get to the house, they deal with like this it's a really long, slow, painful scene of like them and Heiter when he drugs them and sedates them. They wake up, they're angry, they're scared. He's explaining things to them. He kills a guy that he had captured previously that he was going to use, but he didn't match.
He says like he's not compatible.
Yeah,
which
he kills him.
Doesn't mean anything.
Lindsay stages an escape.
Yeah,
and he's like, "You will be my middle piece."
Yeah,
I know this
as punishment. Which I will say right now, I said I wanted to approach it from a critical perspective. That is the first and most crucial mistake of the entire movie. A horror thriller like this is entirely built around the charisma and interplay of the protagonist and the antagonist, right? Like, Halloween works because it's not just that Michael Myers is scary, it's that we like and care about Jamie Lee Curtis. It's why Friday the 13th is a bad movie, even though it was campy. There is no protagonist. I'm not following anyone and doing anything. Jenny, from before the midpoint, gets designated the middle, which makes it physically impossible for her to drive the plot.
Yeah.
for even a single minute
100%.
afterwards.
She can't communicate. She can't make decisions for the group. Katsuro is the front, and he gets to make all the decisions. He's the most engaged with the doctor the whole time. And she's just in the back being like, eh.
Making an unidentified Japanese tourist the head of the Centipede was a wild choice.
Yeah.
And the absolute wrong one to do.
And the person that constantly speaks Japanese and not English, and it wasn't subtitled occasionally.
Yeah.
Like, there was moments where it's just him yelling, and you're like, oh, what did he say? But the subtitles, maybe it worked in the theaters, but I was watching it being like, what the fuck is he saying?
Doubtful.
It was an odd choice. And really, they just did it because they wanted her to be trapped at the end between two dead people. That was the idea.
Yeah.
Her getting trapped there, which was a grim ending. And what annoys me about this film is that there's parts of it that were really gory and did disturb me, and it did its job in a sense. As a story, fucking shocking. And yeah, it takes half of the film to get to the centipede. It's cripplingly slow the entire time.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to talk about was 100% the performances of the two girls just in that first scene. I just really want to touch on that for a second.
Yeah.
The first two scenes were like somehow outrageously bad, like the worst parts of the entire film. Before they meet Haita, it was like they're like on the phone, the American tourists are chatting to a friend, and they say that they're basically giving us exposition on the phone being like, it's been great in Germany. We met this cute waiter. He's invited us to a party.
Yeah.
And then they're driving and they break down, and the hysterical reactions they have to breaking down was insane.
Yeah.
Lindsay, I don't know where we're going. Don't worry, Jenny, okay? We'll just have to find someone.
That's way too good a performance. I don't know where we're going.
Maybe you should call. He's so weird. We're lost. Where are we going, Lindsay? I love how they say each other's names a lot in the space of 10 minutes.
So much. It's like a first draft of a student production. And I don't mean like film student. I mean like high school student.
Yeah.
It's when it started and we see the performances, I immediately went, oh, it's this kind of movie. But it wasn't.
Because Haida, the guy that played Haida, was pretty good. He wasn't bad.
Okay.
He wasn't as bad as the film made us think it would be.
I said earlier, a movie like this relies on their charisma. And I do think he was the best part of this movie, but I do think he's not as good as he needed to be for that role.
Yeah.
There's parts where I can see him be
better
interesting.
Actors, for sure.
Well, yeah, sure. But it still felt like gimmicky instead of that sort of like fun, charismatic evil.
The doctor coming into it for me was almost like salvation in a way, because like all of his actually speaking lines were terrible, and it was because the dialogue sucked.
Yeah.
The dialogue was outrageously bad.
Yeah.
And just the bit where she's like, "Oh my god, Jenny, she's passing out. Like, what's wrong with her?" And he's like, "Rohypnol. Date rape." I think he just says it. He's just like,
no, he says
like
it's the rape drug.
Yeah, Rohypnol. He just tells them. There's no suspense or tension.
Yeah.
He's the worst villain. He's immediately seedy and sus. And you're like, if I saw him at the door, I'd be like, let's not go inside. I'd rather wander through the wilderness than go into that man's house.
Yeah.
His face is too creased. His jaw is too like wide and angular.
Yeah.
He's 100% going to eat us.
He looked like someone, and I couldn't figure out who it was.
Yeah.
He looked 100% like someone. Maybe he sort of looked like James Urbaniak, but that's a very niche pick.
In a certain sense, I'm like, you girls deserved to get Human Centipeded, because looking at him through the doorframe, you should have known something was up. That man doesn't look natural.
I actually think it's okay that they didn't anticipate becoming a human centipede.
I'm actively victim blaming here, okay?
Oh, okay, yeah, sure.
I think, like, did you see what they were wearing? And also, like, the time of night that they were out, like, they were asking for it.
They had little sort of long insects all over their clothes, right? Like, as a pattern.
What?
Well, you said, look at what they were wearing. I was trying to say, it does invite a centipedal reaction. Lots of legs, and tons of them.
100%. It's more that it was skimpy, slutty, not godly.
Yeah, the end, you could almost say the ass of their shirt was stitched to the mouth of their pants.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that, like, the doctor did everything that was basically within his, like, rights. He can't control himself. That's what I'm saying. And he also has a very promising career as a young sportsman, so we really can't put him under fire too much here, can we?
This is a weird, but I know where you're going with it bit, considering how you started the episode.
Yeah, I came in being like, I'm angry, I'm a woman, I'm angry about this film. Because, okay, I'll get it. The reason that I got angry about this film, in my research, I saw a lot of people label them as like ditzy or silly, like stupid women, because they were just, But also like the way that they were performing, they just come off as like stupid and incompetent.
Yeah.
And they come to this man's house and they literally get stitched onto each other's like anus and to a man's anus. But I didn't enjoy that our two female protagonists were stitched at the end of the Human Centipede and had no autonomy.
Yeah.
And there was a random Japanese man that became like the leader of the pack.
Yeah.
I hated that. I was like, why did we watch these two women that are our protagonists be forced into a submissive part of the centipede and the man is at the front?
Yeah.
I don't like that.
I didn't
it made
like
me
it either.
angry. And also the reason I was getting so angry about it as well is that when I looked into Tom Six, I think that's when my blood started boiling a bit. I went down a bit of a rabbit hole reading his interviews and finding more about this man, because obviously I wanted to know the kind of person that would create this film. So as I said, he's a Dutch filmmaker. This was just like basically an idea he had that he thought would be really cool. He ran with it. He got funding. When he pitched it to production companies, he didn't really go into detail about the actual kinds of body stitching that happened in the film. He just said it was a horror that involved bodies getting stitched together, and they were like, sounds cool, man. But they didn't know the specifics. And apparently when they found out later, they were like, well, fuck, we've already sunk our money into this. We've signed all the contracts. We actually can't go back on this deal.
Yeah.
It just better be good. What I don't like about him is that he's profoundly proud of these films. Profoundly proud. He thinks that he's making a masterpiece like artwork that people will understand better in 100 years. He thinks that he's like really paving the way for new filmmakers, that he'll be like glorified.
That's what I meant.
And he thinks that he's making an actual statement about fascism.
Yeah.
And he's not, because Haida is German and seems quite like Nazi adjacent. And he's like, it's about fascism. And it's like, yeah, what about it?
Yeah.
What are you saying?
That guy's clearly modeled after a Nazi doctor, and
he is,
that's probably why the guy is Japanese as well.
So the guy that he was modeled after, you've probably heard of him. His name...
Mengele?
This character's name is literally Joseph, the angel of death, like the fucking doctor in Auschwitz that was basically performing all sorts of gruesome like experiments on stitching people together and cutting them open. And yeah, it's really gruesome. He was based on a bunch of Nazi doctors.
Yeah.
So I get that, but what are you saying?
Yeah,
What's the point? Why are you making us watch these awful, gory acts of brutality and violence for no reason?
I feel like
I hate that.
a lot of us are a little more switched on about things like that now, but I definitely feel like there was a long time where, and it's still going on, where like you were just meant to make a villain Nazi-ish, but then remove them entirely from the context of fascism, and then go look at the point I'm making. But if you remove it from the context, it's no point. Like making him German and making the guy at the head of it Japanese doesn't make a comment on fascism or World War II. Making him be inspired by a Nazi doctor who also did human experimentation. Like, the characters don't do anything that make that have a point.
Yeah. And, like, this is what he said. So, Tom Six, someone had asked him about the shock value of his film, and he said, I'm all about creating original work and pushing boundaries of art and film. I hate mediocre shit. It's great to have raised the bar, but not just to shock for the shock. I'm the guy that travels the 7 seas while others stay safely on shore, and I salute the very few fellow filmmakers who have and do the same, because I know how hard it is, especially now in our politically correct times.
Oh, my God.
Big groan, big thumbs down to this fucking guy.
You know,
the more I read about him, the worse it got.
The reason I hated Human Centipede was just because PC culture doesn't want you to stitch mouths to assholes.
Then I got down this rabbit hole. This was my emotional process, guys.
Yeah.
Come with me on this roller coaster.
Sure.
When I started reading about Tom Six, I then just started getting angry, thinking about the fact that a lot of men like this. He keeps saying that he's a really nice, friendly guy, had a very sheltered life. He's not a disturbed man. He's had to say that a lot, being like, I'm not disturbed. I'm really nice and like I'm a sweet dude. I'm just putting into film like crazy dark fantasies we all have. We don't all have fantasies about stitching a mouth to an anus, but sure. What made me angry is that I was reading into him and he was like, I feel like he's another mediocre little man with dark fantasies that he has admitted to, that he thinks if he puts it into film, it makes it art, and it's not the case.
Yeah.
Like, there's no... I come at this from a very particular perspective in that I think a lot of films need to have a strong theme that they're pointing to in order to be valid and to waste my time, essentially, to take up my time.
Yeah.
I want it to tell me something. This film told me nothing, so I sat through an hour and a half of barbaric acts for nothing, and that makes me angry.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm getting frustrated. It's also the fact that he's another little fucking man making these weird... I hate the word perverted because it sounds like prudish, but like there's a certain perversion to like the things this guy's interested in, and I don't like it.
It is profound arrogance to have a thought and then assume that it will be inherently relatable even if it doesn't have a viewpoint.
Yeah.
Like, it's not necessarily arrogant, although I guess you could argue it is, to have an idea for a story and think people will like it. But the idea that he is like, everyone thinks like this, I'm the only one brave enough to say it. It's like, no, I do think it's a you thing.
Yeah.
Like, I have known a lot of usually straight, white, upper class guys, not exclusively though, who have that sort of like, I'm sheltered, thus I can't be evil, although I am participatory in a social class that does commit evil. And I think horrid little thoughts.
Yeah.
And everyone does that. That's why I believe man is truly evil. And I'm like, I think you just need to go to therapy.
100%.
Like, process your shit.
So what made me more angry, and the reason I kept thinking about this, is that I was reading up on some of his big influences. Salo, the 120 Days of Sodom. And it's by the Italian director Pier Paolo Pasolini. It's a 70s film. I think it came out in, 73?
Yeah,
75.
I assume it's referring to like Sodom and Gomorrah.
It was based on a book also called The 120 Days of Sodom by Marquis de Sade or Sade. And it's basically about a group of men who keep about 18 young children and torture them and rape them and beat them and just abuse the shit out of these children. That's what the film's about. I haven't seen it, but I read up on it because it was a huge influence for this film. And I was reading about Pasolini, who is one of the most like revered Italian directors, and how Salo, I don't know how to pronounce it, is also a very divisive film because people either love it or hate it. They either think it's the most disgusting thing they've ever seen, it's barbaric to make it, or they think it's a piece of art and it's incredible and it's like vivid and it's and like it's emotive. So it's very divisive as a film. But I was looking up him as a director as well, and all of his films were quite similar in this way. And there was that little part of me that was like, I'm sick of watching men's perversions on screen. And I know that sounds strange because I know there is a sense of artistry behind it. But sometimes I feel like eroticism, which has its place in art and literature, is often twisted by men into just meaningless gore and graphicness that we don't need to see.
Yeah,
That's what makes me angry. I'm not saying I don't want eroticism on screen. I just think it's twisted by the wrong men, and then they make films like that are just genuinely disturbing for no reason.
No, I know what you mean. There's been a lot of debate on Twitter recently, and I totally agree with it. Of like, blockbusters in the 70s and 80s used to be allowed to be horny in a way that like blockbusters now aren't. We've kind of stripped sex entirely out of movies.
I think it's because we forgot how to find the line.
Yeah, and that's a problem. Like, it's good that we're not representing as much sexual assault, but it actually means that there isn't any nice sex on screen anymore. It's
for sure.
just when it's shown
I
for
love
evil.
when intimacy and eroticism is displayed well, and doesn't always have to be like, I'm not all for like rape scenes either. I'm not saying that everything has to be like a really loving, beautiful sex scene. But if it's not furthering the plot, or if it's not tied to the theme, I don't want to see it. I don't want fucking little Italian men. I haven't watched this film. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not interested in watching this film because I hate the idea of these young auteur directors making really disturbing cinema, and they're revered for it. And I just think, I'm not explaining myself very well, but I do think that when women approach cinema and they make more like erotic things, there's usually like an actual like theme or purpose behind it, and it really feels like powerful and like integrated in the film. I'm just sick of reading and watching things made by perverted little men with like one hand on their pen and the other on their cock because they're horny all day. I fucking hate it. I'm so annoyed about it.
And before you fucking men come in here going, these feminists are just hating on men. First of all, how'd you get here? Why are you still here this many episodes deep? That's so wild that this is the breaking point for you. But also, it's easy for us to complain about men making things because, you know, what is it? 95% of Hollywood directors are men. Like, you know, it's not even just about men. It's just about what we're seeing on screen, and it's almost all made by men.
Yeah. I'm hitting my limits at this point. I'm hitting my limits because I don't think the depictions of sex, because it's usually entangled in violence, is healthy when it's done by men. I'm sick of it. Like, I'm frothing with rage over it when I started reading about it. Haven't even seen the film. Haven't even seen it. But I read about it and it made me angry. I need to just... Michelle, calm me down. What can you do to calm me down? Just bring me bring me back down here. I didn't even explain my point fully, and there's more things I'd like to talk about, but it would take up far too much time.
No. Let's bring it back. We'll do a little role reversal. You know, you've been keeping it on track. Now it's time for me to bring some sillies. Hey, in this movie, you know the bit where he was trying to like train him like a dog with a newspaper? Wonder what's on that newspaper. Am I right? You know? Hey, Liz going, little doggy. Oh, okay. You know, like when the police showed up, I was like,
What?
hey, at the end of the movie, when the police showed up?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, that's, you know, I mean, it didn't have any tension whatsoever, but then they just like sort of were like, let's fuck off. I'm like, classic police not doing anything. Am I right?
That's pretty good.
It's pretty
That's
good.
actually pretty good.
Oh, that's pretty good, you know?
pretty good.
At the beginning when they're driving around, what if the car they were driving was Herbie, fully loaded?
That's excellent.
Now they're in the forest and they're like, oh, we're stuck here, Herbie. And Herbie's like, wah, wah.
That's good.
So then at the end, you know, they're a human centipede going, ah, ah, and then busting through the wall, comes Herbie.
Hey, quick question as well. Who do you think would win, Herbie or Brum?
Oh, I took me so long to remember Brum.
Brum.
He was in your mum's car, right?
Yeah.
Herbie,
win?
easily. Herbie would wreck a bitch.
Actually, yeah, I don't know why I asked. Brum is so dainty and scared of everything.
Brum is a wuss.
Brum used to make me cry. I think something deeply resonated in me about Brum. He'd be in his little garage, it'd be all quiet and dark, and then he'd turn on his little lights and he'd be like, I'm ready for a little adventure. But the world's so big and scary and he's so small and yellow.
I really like Thomas the Tank Engine. I loved Thomas the Tank Engine when I was younger. Although I've heard some people argue that it has very authoritarian undertones, which I can't comment because I haven't watched it since I was a little child. I really like the Fat Controller, who as a kid I couldn't enunciate very well, so I always called him the Fuck Controller, which always made my mum laugh so much.
We're having a chuckle right now.
And then there's that time they just brick the green one, Henry, up. They're like, Henry, you're broken. Fuck you. Fuck you. And then they start bricking him up. And they're like, you did this, Henry. You made a mistake and now you're here. Sit and think about what you've done while you suffocate. And then the Fat Controller walks away.
Thomas the Tank Engine lore.
It's when the Fat Controller was played by James Gandolfini. He takes a cigar and was like, hey, think about what you've done, Henry, huh? And what are you talking about? It doesn't sound like that. That's not what James Gandolfini sounds like.
Apologies for my rant. All I was trying to say...
Good. I'm really glad.
All I wanted to say, this is a TDLR for anyone listening.
Yeah.
That,
I'm going to edit in here.
No, I think you should like comically just do like a little like noises of speeding up the track, like
yeah.
As I talk. You just keep
I'm
skipping
just
over my
sick
monologue.
of little... these fucking perverted...
What I want to say is that I think it's really interesting when we explore sex in different ways on screen and eroticism. Sure. I think that's great. I'm just sick of men doing it because it's usually fueled by the wrong intentions and it doesn't have anything interesting to say. I'm bored of it. It's not sexy anymore. It's boring.
Well, and I totally get what you mean because this movie, very not sexy.
Yeah.
Really unsexy.
100%. 100%. Also, I also wanted to touch on the fact that like the actual gore of it, right?
Yeah.
There were scenes that made me like freak the fuck out. Like the bit at the end where they've just killed Hyder or he stabbed him and he rips a bit of his neck off and you're sitting there being like, okay, actually kill him. Like, yeah. He's right there. You've got the scalpel.
It's the most obvious horror
just
thing.
Actually do it. And they're like, let's go. And they start crawling up the stairs and Hyder gets up and follows them and it's not really tense because you're like, you should have just killed him down there. But that bit hurt because as they're going up the stairs they're ripping from each other. That bit was awful. That bit was hard.
That whole end sequence from when the cops show up to that bit really was the first hour. I was like, this movie is nowhere near as violent and gory as it promised. But that last 28 minutes. Now I can't tell, did I feel like vomiting because it was very upsetting or because I was eating cold tomato-based fettuccine whilst watching it? You tell me.
Who's to say?
Maybe that was a bad
We'll
idea.
never know.
Was to eat cold tomato pasta.
I mean, pasta
in
tastes
my
better
car.
cold because you can taste it better.
It's just
Heat gets in the way to flavor.
fuck?
When you heat up pasta, you can taste it less,
Cold?
but cold, you get every flavor on the
What
spectrum,
the fuck
baby.
is wrong with
Heat
you?
gets in the way of flavor. That's my new blog post. It's up today.
It's just so fundamentally oppositional to almost all culinary understanding.
Well, why don't we get Gordon Ramsay on the line and we'll ask him?
Well, but
Hello.
how many times a season
me,
of MasterChef does
Gordon
he go
Ramsay.
with his two hands? He goes, "That is ice cold."
That is raw.
No, he.
That's
Sometimes
fucking
it's
raw.
But sometimes it's not that it's raw; it's that it's ice cold.
That is ice cold.
Yeah,
And raw.
yeah.
Splash of olive oil.
And then he'll like put his hands together by just the fingertips as he's like pointing forwards a little bit.
Salt in the pan.
Yeah, there you go.
I use fresh beef bourguignon. That smells great.
I mean, you guys can't see it, but the hand performance is astounding.
It's incredible.
It's truly incredible.
Look at that. That is remarkable.
Now, see, if Gordon Ramsay played the Doctor, this is what I'm talking about when I say charisma would help this movie.
Yeah, for sure.
You know,
I
that
thought
would
you
really
meant
help.
Doctor from Doctor Who for a second, and that
Yeah.
was just a whole set of mental
Well,
images.
that too, actually. If
You fucking baloney! Get in the TARDIS! Get in
oh,
the
I thought it was
TARDIS!
the alien.
I want to watch Gordon Ramsay be the Doctor with his alien companion.
Oh, Doctor! Oh, now it is the companion.
What are you saying? Fucking idiot sandwich.
He's really rude to this companion.
He's in Hell's Kitchen. I'm sorry.
But then there's the one episode where he gains the power of speech and he's like, "I am more intelligent than you could ever imagine, Gordon." That's right, not even the Doctor. I know you're Gordon.
That was a really weird episode of Doctor Who, actually. That was when Moffat
looks
came back for a one-off episode.
Fully into the camera and says, "I know you." And I've heard everyone hears their own name.
Where were we? We need to go back. Where were we
That
before?
end sequence, for me, the most upsetting part, like as you said, like that whole end sequence is bad, and the part that actually made me gag a little, I forget the Japanese character's name because he's sort of unnamed the majority of the
Yeah,
time.
Katsuro.
His like spiel of trying to be intelligent, I was like, whatever. It's really stupid
I'm an
and
insect.
upsetting.
Hey, mister.
The bit that got me most of all is like Jenny at the back, like slowly dying of septic shock, isn't like horrific. It's upsetting.
It was, and that for me, I liked the most. So you know how throughout the whole film,
I hated it the most.
I mean, I like it in that it was effective and it made me
Right.
sad because you know how throughout the film they're like holding hands a lot, and
Yeah.
they're being like, oh, like we're still together, we're still
That
holding
was a
hands. That's
touch
how
I
they
did like.
communicate.
Yeah.
And then at the end, Katsuro's dead on the ground, bleeding out in front of her, and she's like grabbing Jenny's hand, and Jenny isn't grabbing back anymore because Jenny is just dying of sepsis. That bit was actually really sad, and that last shot of her sandwiched between a bleeding out Katsuro and a literally pale and ghostly Jenny that's just died behind her. That shot, I was like, that's interesting, but I wish the film kept going.
Well,
because what the film could have been, if we're dealing with this gory piece of shit, is that they become the Human Centipede by Act 1.
Yeah.
By the end of the first act.
Yeah.
And that point is the low point where she's got two dead people
Yeah.
behind her and she's got to make it out.
Yeah.
I want her to make it out.
'Cause
I was left unsatisfied.
A lot of what makes horror feel safe is that you're waiting for the catharsis. You know, in Get Out, he makes it out. In Halloween, Michael Myers gets got. You know, in Scream, they get Ghostface. You know, like that catharsis is how you feel safe in a horror movie because you're
Yeah.
like, through all of this one will make it. And even if it's not in like The Thing where it's a downer ending, like they made it, even though the ending is sort of ambiguous, but they made it effectively.
Yeah.
You can have a downer ending if it's at least tied thematically to what's going on, but because this isn't tied thematically, it just made
It
me
has
go
no
like,
theme.
I'm just sad. Like, why did I?
The theme
What
is
was that for?
Insects. Centipedes.
Is the theme that it upset me?
Yeah.
Because that's not a theme. That's not an effective experiment in cinema.
So annoying. So annoying.
It's so easy to make me sad, you know?
That's true.
Yeah.
You're the target audience.
Well, but that's
She's already sad.
But I'm saying, like, you don't need to do this to make me sad.
Yeah.
You can have a framework around it.
Michelle, would you like some trivia?
I would really desperately love some trivia.
Director Tom Six showed a drawing of the Human Centipede to all the actresses who showed up to the casting sessions. Many actresses walked out in disgust after discovering what the role actually entailed.
Correct.
He estimates it was up to 70% of actresses left the audition. And that's fair enough.
I think...
And he said that he liked that the 2 main actresses he did choose had the balls to be up in someone else's ass for a lot of the casting, for a lot of the shooting. And I was like, this is bizarre. He also said all the girls that auditioned were very beautiful. I was like, you're a weirdo. You're a weird guy.
Bragging.
I think you're actually just a really weird dude. He's also making a new film called The Anania Club. Do you know what Anania is?
I know what Narnia is.
Onania, let me get the description for you. It's an old term.
Yeah, C.S. Lewis.
It's an old term for masturbating.
That's not what I remember.
The wardrobe was just a metaphor. It's actually where the kids called in to get a bit of privacy. The Onania Club, is a film that he's coming out with. So Onania is an old term for masturbation. It's also a term for when like a guy pulls out instead of coming in a woman as like a method of birth control.
Okay.
His new film is called The Onania Club, and it's about a bunch of women that masturbate to really graphic, violent material, and it keeps escalating. And hey, I haven't seen it. Maybe there's a commentary there, but I was like, of course you would. You would. A woman doesn't get to make that, but you get to make that. A female director and writer doesn't get to make that project to explore female sexuality. You get to make it, and you get to make it weird because you're a fucking gross dude.
Yeah.
That's why I'm angry. That's another part of why I'm angry. There's a lot of layers.
Yeah.
Sorry, Michelle.
But
think about Brum.
What I was gonna
Little
say,
yellow man.
I don't even think 70% of them walked out because they were like, "That's so disgusting." I think they walked out because they were like, "Oh, it's this kind of movie. I can tell this is going to be a bad shoot, and I'm going to get underpaid and disrespected."
And he's kind of creepy.
Yeah.
Why is he wearing a hat and smoking a cigar inside?
Like 100%.
Also, like, yeah, he was also saying that like he criticized the actresses that walked out because they just wanted to be pretty on camera. It's like, no, they probably just didn't want to take part in your really fucked fantasy.
Yeah.
They just didn't. They probably didn't feel comfortable, you horrific arsehole.
Maybe those actresses were particularly bold, but also maybe they needed to pay rent. Like,
yeah. Director Tom Six contacted a real surgeon for the Human Centipede design. This is why the film has the tagline 100% medically accurate, which is not true.
Yeah, it isn't true. It's also what I don't understand about that, and it is maybe kind of a larger critique. It bills itself as this like crazy idea, and again, like as if it would need medical assistance. All we see is heads close to a butthole.
Yeah.
What aspect of it did he get consultation on?
I read into this. It wasn't even in IMDb's trivia. I did the research today.
I appreciate that.
He reached out to a surgeon who wanted to remain anonymous because the surgeon at first was like, I've taken an oath and I think that helping this project would go against the oath that I've taken as a doctor.
But they still did it.
And then he got back in touch again and was like, yeah, but do it. And the guy was like, okay. But don't credit me. And they did a bunch of consultations and he showed him his designs, and the surgeon got back to him being like, well, you couldn't just stitch a mouth onto an anus because it just wouldn't work. Physically it wouldn't work. But what you'd have to do is take some skin off the butt flaps and then adhere it here like a little trough, almost leading down into your mouth.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it. And like it would still stitch the lips together, but he basically had to rearrange the skin on the butt to stitch it firmly onto the face. Because he was like, if you stitch the lips directly onto the anus, it would just tear really quickly. You need multiple levels of stitching in order for it to stay on properly and heal properly. So that was part of it.
I might trim some of that explanation for the sake of our listeners.
Wow. Was it too long?
No, it was
too graphic.
It was very clear.
Keep that in. Here's some information about the consuming of feces, which was an awful scene to watch as well, where he's like, feed her, and Katsura's just shitting in her mouth.
Is that what this podcast is?
What?
The trivia is how eating shit works.
Yeah. This is a new section in the podcast, right?
Sure.
How shit works. Down.
But it's literal.
Feces is simply what remains of food after most, if not all, the nutrients have been absorbed from it by the body, although it usually retains some water. Because of this, the only person who could hypothetically survive living as part of a human centipede for more than a few weeks would have to be the person in the front.
Yeah.
The other members of the centipede would eventually die from lack of water unless they receive intravenous fluids. Is it intravenous? That's how you say it? Yeah. They would most likely die due to nutritional deficiencies in that case. In the unlikely case that this doesn't kill them, ingesting fecal bacteria causes severe lung and stomach infections.
Yeah.
Like, it just wouldn't work.
Well, that's the most obvious thing about
fundamentally,
it.
it wouldn't work.
Like, this is what I mean by bait. The idea is so obviously stupid. It so obviously cannot work. There's part of me
Tom Six genuinely believes it does work. He doesn't listen to any of this critique, by the way. He's like, no, a Human Centipede could work. That's why I made this film.
But that's what
explore it.
That's what I mean. The bait is that if I go, this is dumb because it doesn't work, he goes, but it will work.
Yeah. And
no, it's dumb because it's a bad movie. Also, it doesn't work.
A lot of reviewers are like, fuck, is this guy, like Tom Six putting on his tagline 100% medically accurate? They're like, he knows it isn't. He's claiming it still is, even though people are giving him facts about how a Human Centipede couldn't work. But he's just doing it for publicity. He's like, it's a media tactic of being like, yeah, 100% could be a thing.
I almost resent the need for facts to say it doesn't work. It's so obvious. Common sense suggests that like thousands of years of cultural telling of like how food and fecal matter work suggests it doesn't work.
Here's a fun little piece of trivia that will lead perfectly into the review section.
Excellent.
Roger Ebert refused to assign this film a star rating for his review. And this is not to be confused with giving it a 0-star rating, which he hands out to the very worst films that he sees.
Sure.
He gave this a nothing star. Not a review at all. He refused to assign this film a star, saying it doesn't really matter whether the film is perceived as good or bad. He closed the review by writing, "This film is what it is and occupies a world where the stars don't shine."
Yeah.
He hated it. He couldn't.
I agree with that. To expand on your point earlier, the main thing I don't like about this movie, but also Tom Six's viewpoint, is like making a movie where things are bad. Your viewpoint, I guess, is that humanity is inherently evil and flawed. Like, that's not controversial and edgy. That's exactly what we're encouraged to believe because it plays into the hands of people who want to exploit us. Like, that it's not clever. It is infinitely more bright and wonderful to believe the real truth, which is that human beings are communal and love being with each other and try to care for each other.
Samwise Gamgee said it best. There's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for.
Yeah.
Fuck you, Tom Six. I'd watch Samwise Gamgee and Tom Six brawls. Samwise would just beat the shit out of him.
He beat the fuck out of Shelob.
Yeah.
Like, we know he'd win.
Do you want to hear some actual reviews?
Yeah! Reviews!
Rotten Tomatoes gave the film a 50% approval rating, which is really high considering what we've dealt with in the past. That's really high.
But it's the thing where like the people who are rating it are the people who are going there to give it a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
It's probably like a meme.
Yeah, there is a lot of that. There is a meme, but that's also like on Rotten Tomatoes. They do that less. On IMDb, they do ratings as a meme. And there's heaps on IMDb.
No, but I mean, like, on IMDb, on Rotten Tomatoes, they do things like review bomb Captain Marvel because it's a woman. I'm saying, like, this was probably a meme on 4chan where they were like, let's love this movie.
I think there was, because, again, the IMDb reviews indicate that too. But Variety magazine writer Pete DeBerge criticized the film's lack of social commentary, saying that it could not be bothered to expand upon its unpleasant premise.
Yeah.
Inviting audiences to revel in its sick humor by favoring Dr. Hyder and characterizing the victims as shallow expendables. And that's exactly how I feel about it. It's gore with no purpose at all. The New York Times review by Jeanette Katsuli noted that whether the film was a commentary on Nazi atrocities or a literal expression of filmmaking politics, the grotesque fusion at least silences the female leads, both of whose voices could strip paint. I didn't like that comment because it's another way to shut women up. Again, I've just been on this like insane fucking feminist rampage tonight reading everything. This is a female reviewer saying that the two leads had nasal voices. Shut up.
Sure.
Stop criticizing women for talking. I don't care if you don't like the sound of their voice. Just think about the fact that you're literally saying you don't like hearing a woman talk.
Yeah.
There's already so many issues with that in the first place. They don't need it from women and men. Shut up. Stop saying that.
There were a lot of critiques of Hillary Clinton. She's shrill wasn't one of them.
Here's a review from Brent McKnight. Not nearly as shocking as it thinks it is. Robbie Collin from News of the World said, however rank the idea might be, the execution will barely make you flinch. True.
Yeah.
And here are two reviews from IMDb. This one is bad taste and good mood. And this is definitely an ironic one, 10 out of 10.
Oh, okay.
What's wrong with you folks? How come you all here review this flick as a horror movie? This one is nothing but a joke. A sophisticated joke that only European perverted mind could produce. Nothing personal, Mr. Six. Great. Great. Thank you, European perverted director Tom Six, for a half-hour tasteless masterpiece. 10 out of 10.
That was written by the family from Hostel.
And here's my personal favorite review I plucked out of the IMDb archives. Another 10 out of 10 review by Extinct Night. And it was called It's Like a Choo-Choo Train. It's like a choo-choo train. That is how my brother described it. 10 out of 10.
I mean, you know what? I'm kind of coming around.
Yeah.
I like trains.
You
I
love
like things that are
choo-choos.
train adjacent.
Yep.
Why not? I even said earlier, I like Thomas the Tank Engine. Is this like that?
But everything's linked.
Hell yeah.
Tonight's been a real revelation.
Yeah. They should have named the guy at the front Thomas.
What's your review of this film, Michelle?
Like I said, I really didn't like this movie, and I don't want to fall into the trap of saying that I hated it because it was gross. Because I hated it because it was incompetently made.
Yeah.
Like, there's parts of... I was thinking about this on the drive home. There's parts of it with, like, the cops coming over, and he's trying to palm them off while they are trying to escape, and, like, going up the stairs that, like, on paper, I'm like, that actually is an effective scene from a horror movie. But it's not an effective scene from this horror movie. Instead, it's played so dull and so boring.
It's so hammy as well.
It's
Him being
so
like,
hammy.
drink this water,
Yeah.
which is spiked, and leave my house. How dare you insinuate I have something to do with these
And he just, like,
disappearances?
drops the thing, and there's like the injection.
The injection in it to sedate him, and he's like, it's insulin.
Yeah. So like it is incompetently made.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was like upsetting. I wish it had a viewpoint. This movie was as bad as how I describe Lars von Trier, who I
Yeah.
really don't fucking like as a director. It's just disgusting and hates women for no reason. But without any theoretical artistry.
This film just reeked of hating women. That's what really got me. There isn't anything blatant in it necessarily, but it just reeked of it. You can tell Tom Six is just a fucked guy.
Yeah, it feels like it's made by someone who would be easily radicalized in the alt-right, or almost as bad, thinks that he's a lefty, but is actually importing a lot of those, there's winners and losers and humans are evil and I'm smarter than everyone sort of ethos. And I really hate that. And I really hated this movie. I'm going to give it 0.5.
Yeah.
It gets 0.5 because there's parts of it that I'm like, that is a movie.
Yeah. That's very generous of you, Michelle.
think
I'm
so.
giving it a solid 0.
Yeah.
And I don't want to explain anything more about my decision.
I knew that was coming, yeah.
Yeah. That was the Human Centipede. You can find us on Twitter at RateDescendPod, or you can email us at ratingdescending@gmail.com.
Or you can find us on our own accounts. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at michelle.stclair.
And I'm on Instagram under Abigail J. Ward.
And if you can, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps.
Yes, it does. Well, what are we watching next week, Michelle?
Next week, we're watching something super thematically in line with Human Centipede. Big mamas like father, like son.
I'm actually excited.
Me too.
After the Human Centipede, I need this. We need this.
We need it. We've sacrificed ourselves for you this week.
Yeah.
Please know what we're giving. We're gifting something that you didn't ask for.
Yeah.
You have to
be
now
grateful.
like us.
Yeah, you have to be our friend.
Grateful.
It's my
Please.
birthday tomorrow, and I watched the Human Centipede
Abigail's
for
birthday
you guys.
as of 4 days ago when you're listening to this. Please be grateful.
Please be nice and get me a present of the week.